Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well. And it has been an eventful week, to say the least. Well, it's been eventful since the start of the election, but in this last week or so, as reform has been basically rocketing in the polls, much, much more than the official polls would have you believe. Uh, Mainstream media and the other parties have been resorting to dirty tricks, to say the least. We've had candidates offered bribes by Conservatives to literally stand down or throw their seat or um, criticise reform and walk away and defect to Conservatives or be take up a job position or something along those lines. We have had mainstream media do its utmost to influence the electorate. Uh, Biased is an understatement. Ultimately, mainstream media has become so arrogant that they feel that they have the right to tell the British public what to do and to deny them information that they may be interested in. But unfortunately, they now have competition. They have had for a few years, and people are increasingly much, much better informed. And they know that mainstream media is trying to control the narrative and lying to everyone. For those of you who may have seen the setups in Question Time, it's actually been quite embarrassing when there was the Question Time with Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Effectively, granted, in the last one, Sunak must have downed 2 or 3 Red Bulls because he was literally um, charged up. But effectively, Keir Starmer had nothing. He absolutely had nothing. And every time he was confronted with something that required an answer, he basically just behaved like a rabbit staring into the headlights, like he had blanked out, like he was complete and utter idiot. There is a saying that is very apt at the moment. Uh, Keir Starmer is smart enough to lie. Rayner is stupid enough to tell the truth. And unfortunately, that's how it is with those two at the moment. It seems quite ironic that people seem to see the Labour Party as the party of the people because they are the party of the Marxists, the party who want to control everyone. And so sinister are their plans that they have all been basically sworn to secrecy. And since the beginning of this election, everything about them has been deceit. Their manifesto is minimal plans to spend so that they only need to produce minimal plans to raise funding. We know where people have slipped up, like Wes Streeting did 2 3 weeks ago in an interview with Trevor Phillips, and he referenced to spending plans that were not in their manifesto. And when he were pushed on where they would raise the money, his argument fell apart. But they're still trying to portray him as being one of their talented people, when in actual fact, all he did was let the proverbial cat out of the bag. And irony of all ironies is that a human rights lawyer has actually warned that Keir Starmer's plans to put VAT on independent schools could go against human rights. And his beloved European Court of Human Rights may actually slap his hand and tell him he's a naughty boy and he needs to do as he's told. So I wonder what he will do there, because that is 1.7 billion, which it wouldn't be, because by the time all the children whose parents couldn't afford to send them to these schools had pulled out, it would end up being a net loss. Anything like that where Labour is concerned is always invariably a catastrophe. That's just how it is. That's how it all has always been. There's only one reason that Labour Party get into power every few years. And that's because apart from their core supporters who will vote for them through their lives, which is not actually enough, there's a curious generation who do not remember the catastrophe of a Labour government. And keep in mind, only three Labour leaders have ever won an election. Only three. Keir Starmer may very well be the fourth. Whether he manages to stay in power, that remains to be seen. So we shall see. Anyway, a little birdie told me that this month is Pride Month. So I thought before I proceed any further, I will share my pride flag with you. There you go. That's my pride flag. I hope that you have your pride flags out too. And if anybody doesn't like it, they can switch over and they can go and watch a video about Keir Starmer, should they wish. Let's just have a look if we've got any questions so far. No, nobody joined us yet. Now, with regards to the media, I think it is clearly obvious that the media have really gone, they have literally excelled themselves this time, not just on television, but also the news media, papers like the Daily Mail, and to name one, for example. They are so blatantly biased and they are so blatantly trying to mislead people. It is untrue. The Daily Mail had an article about how to keep Labour out, and they took this approach, which a softly deceitful approach, which was advising people how to vote to prevent Labour getting a majority. But reading further down, as you got further and further into the article, it was basically an anti-reform article rather than an anti-Labour article, because they have become so desperate, because they do know that their beloved treacherous Conservatives are about to die a political death. The growth of reform over the last few weeks has been absolutely phenomenal. So much so that the media has resorted to effectively targeting innocent candidates, looking for excuses to smear them, looking for anything that they can find that they can twist. You liked this 8 years ago, which makes you a fascist or an anti-Semite, whatever the case may be. You shared something years ago, anything, and they do portray it in that manner. I've even experienced it myself. Not that it matters, because it's actually been very, very beneficial, because people locally have been getting in touch. People can see through it. What they have done effectively with every step that they have taken to enforce their views on the British public, it has backfired every single step. It backfired when they jumped on Farage last week, and then Farage exposed Boris Johnson of actually being the liar over Ukraine. It has backfired over the guy they sent to Clapton, who was, without a shadow of a doubt, let's just forget whether he was sent there. Let's forget anything else and let's just look at the facts. What are the odds that somebody turns up who doesn't live in the area, offers to go out and give leaflets? I've had that. You don't know who they are, effectively. Somebody contacts you and says, I'd like to help. Can I have some leaflets? I've gone, said hello, spoken to them for 5 minutes, given them some flyers. If they go out and they do not behave well, then effectively the media, if they say something wrong, would actually connect me to that person, which is what they tried to do. If you watch the footage, is there anybody really, apart from the Labour voters who, they're beyond salvation, so we don't bother with them? Is there anybody with good sense who would believe that that was actually real, that somebody, even if they have those views, in modern Britain today openly just speaks in that manner, so loudly, so brash, to total strangers who he doesn't know who they are. Look at that, firstly. And not in his area. And by chance, out of all of those people who were there, he offered to put people in his car to go out as a team. And he actually, by coincidence, happened to have had the film crew in his car. It was just complete fluke. They just struck gold. And not only they struck gold by getting into the car with the racist, but that racist was loud and clear. How many times have you heard covert footage? And normally it requires subtitles because it's always a bit muffled, because it's done covertly. He was so clear, you would think that he was laved up with a microphone so that we could hear him perfectly clear, because there was not one instance where his voice was muffled. Not one. And not only did the right man appear in the right place and get the right people in his car who happened to be there with their cameras to pick him up with good quality video and brilliant audio, and he behaved overtly racist, but that happened to be in Nigel Farage's constituency. I've known juries send people for a 10 stretch for less than that, effectively. But what the media don't mention is the Labour candidate for Clacton, a horrible racist who actually is on the record saying that his favourite drink is white man's tears. Labour didn't stand him down. They just withdrew him completely from Clacton, abandoned the campaign, and they've packed him off somewhere else. But nothing's been said about that. Uh, I've been looking up how many of the MPs, I'm not talking candidates, I'm not talking people who've walked in off the street offering to give flyers, MPs within the Labour Party and the Conservative Party who have been suspended or stood down in shame just since 2019. It's quite a lot. And if you actually, I would urge you to go and research it. I'm going to be writing an article about it because it would be nice to actually return the favour and get their names out there. But if you actually put together the number of dishonest and perverted people in these two parties, you would think that if they had an inkling of shame about them, they wouldn't point the finger at anybody else. It literally beggars belief just how immoral they are, and just how many candidates they've had who have behaved badly. Just here, I'm in Northampton, in the next constituency, Wellingborough, the Conservative MP had to stand down for his behaviour. Uh, they're all over the place. There are so many, and these are the ones who have been caught, reported, and and there was evidence, or the evidence was overwhelming as such that they would have to stand down. How many more are there who have quietly got away with indecent behaviour? And that's just in the last 4 or 5 years, let alone the last 10 or 20 or 30 years when Parliament and members of Parliament covered up for monsters like Cyril Smith, for example. Let's just take a look at the questions we've got. Okay, a Guardian reporter called Nigel a rogue. Is this slander? Late to chat, sorry, no problem at all. Thank you for your question. There are quite a few things in the pipeline, but for the moment, what matters is our campaign and focusing on the election. How we deal with all of these, there's only a few days now, and once the election is over and we know exactly where we stand and we can relax a little bit, then we can step back and we can actually address these issues one by one, of course. What have we got here? Oh, First for this one, I suspect many will vote reform, the silent majority. Well, you only needed to look at the rally today in at the NEC Centre, 5,000 plus, I believe, full house, and that was that could have been many more. I have no doubt if there were more time, and that was just one. There were others. There was another one with Ben Habib over in Essex. Same story. Um, People who are going out, um, giving out flyers on my behalf. When I've spoken to them, people are effectively unprompted saying to them that they're voting reform without even being asked. The first thing so many people are saying is, I'm voting reform. Many of them before they're even handed a flyer and know which party they are representing. That says it all. And when you hear Nigel or Richard say something is happening out there, it is significant, really significant. And it has to be. We know it is because they are coming for us with such venom. We are like a Lancaster bomber flying over Germany. When they start shooting at you, you know that you are over the target. That's where we are. And they know it. We know it. Mainstream media knows it. And even if there are uh, immoral um, individuals, as well as uh, entire media companies who have no conscience and will simply try and character assassinate someone for their own benefit, it's backfiring on them. And for example, in my case, I know there were two individual reporters who went out of their way to try and find something that they could twist. It hasn't done anything. Now, I'm not going to waste my time now. I'm not even going to mention them. But it seems to me that the best way to deal with a bully is to actually give them a taste of their own medicine. And guess what? With these people, I'm very well connected in terms of research. I only needed to make a few calls and a few inquiries, previous employers, friends, universities, etc. And you'd be amazed what I dug up. And I haven't even started. But I will leave them to be looking over their shoulder now, because I may say something, I may not. I may simply pass that on to somebody else who can literally destroy them. And I'll just get my popcorn out. I'm not worried because I know I've not done anything wrong, despite the fact that they tried to twist it. And I'm not alone. They've tried it on so many and it has backfired so many times. Out of over 600 candidates, we've had three who have behaved badly and have been told to go, and quite rightly so. I don't think that's bad going, to be perfectly honest, especially when we take into account that it is coming to light that there has been candidates, pseudo candidates, who approached reform to stand as candidates, wait until it's too late, and then withdraw, criticise the party, and say that they're going to Conservatives. Does that sound like a bit of a setup to you? It does to me. Okay. Right, four people in my household will. Jason O'Brien, I'm so delighted to hear that. Absolutely over the moon. Establishment protect the uni party, the servants of the globalists. And as I have said many times before, think about what we are planning to do. Think about the sums that we are going to stop that are being stolen from the British public, that neither of these two insidious disciples of the globalists will even mention when they're on TV squabbling like school children over comparatively pennies. They are insulting our intelligence. They really are. And in fact, we should be angry that they are so arrogant that they actually think we could be taken in by this nonsense. It's just a charade. We're the party that's going to stop these globalists taking billions of your money on this net zero uh, gravy train. Millions, billions, in fact, going to people behind the scenes, making them very, very rich whilst they're destroying our countryside. Billions going in interest payments to private banks, courtesy of the incompetent, dishonest, and overdue Andrew Bailey. He should have been sacked the day after Liz Truss's budget, because even though the measures that she announced were reckless in that she should have taken her time and costed things out, and she should have known what was going to happen, that does not detract from the fact that Andrew Bailey began to, with malice aforethought, destabilize the markets the night before the budget. And if there's going to be blame apportioned for the crisis after that, I would say he really should take more of the blame than Liz Truss. They're both to blame, of course, and we know the catastrophe that they caused. But all he's doing is feathering his nest, but more importantly, it's his friends, all these people that are taking billions on money the Bank of England created out of thin air. It's If it were an everyday person, they would be in prison. What have we got here? I really hope this Channel 4 escapade gets thoroughly investigated and not allowed to fall by the wayside. Knowing Nigel Farage, what do you think? Think about it. Dame, what was her name? Rose Coots Bank was ceremoniously outed, really, to be honest. The BBC apologised to him. They apologised then, and they apologised 3 weeks ago when that arrogant newsreader referred to him as using his customary inflammatory language. So I don't think that it's going to just go away. I do believe that the truth will be outed officially. Have you talked about the latest attempted stitch up by the Tories that was recorded and sent to the press? Just saw it on Tuesday TV. I just saw it a little bit just before I went live. I will watch it again afterwards. I'm fully aware of it. I'm delighted to hear about it. And these are the desperate measures that they are resorting to. The next 3 days, we literally need to be sleeping with one eye open. That is the political danger that every single one of us is facing. But guess what? We're prepared for it. We're here to take on these gutless, treacherous career politicians who have no heart, no soul, no love for their country, no patriotism, no honor, and absolutely no shame. They all need to go. And guess what? I've said it before and I'll say it again. When we wake up on Friday morning, no matter what happens, that's not the end. Thursday is not the war, it's the first battle. The war begins on Friday. Some of us may be able to fight from within Westminster. For the rest of us, we are going to be the successful candidates in each constituency. We're going to be their worst nightmare. If they think that they have seen a revolt, they've seen nothing yet, not compared to what is yet to come. That is what we will be doing, because once Keir Starmer gets in, assuming that he does, they will not last the full term, because they have their treacherous unions in the background waiting to leap in. All of the left that will literally create a civil war. He is incapable of leading the country. He cannot run a bath. He is incapable, completely incapable. He cannot ever respond to a question with an articulate answer. ever, not once. And his response to anything is to read a story. He'll normally pull out a letter, and Mrs. Jones wrote to me, and she said how sad she was that she couldn't visit her great aunt Nellie, and meanwhile Boris Johnson was having a party. And obviously the gathering up north where there was Chinese food and beers and plenty of people and Keir Starmer wasn't a party, had nothing to do with the fact that the local police were given £3,000 by the Labour Party 2-3 weeks before. I'll tell you why it wasn't a party. Because no gathering with Keir Starmer present could ever be a party. Let's leave him for now, shall we? Getting bored and falling asleep. How accurate are the polls? Are they either underestimating reform? Okay. The main polls ask people in the following manner as a general rule. This is what they do. This is how dishonest they are. Are you going to vote Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, or other? Most people just say other. They then split it however their own algorithm decides to do so. It's only if people say which parties are in other that they are then told blah 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 monster raving loony party reform, and then they can say reform. And even with that, we're still ahead of the Conservatives irrefutably now. None of them can deny it. If you look at polls online, and I'm not just saying somewhere where there's likely to be more reform voters, but anywhere, every poll online has reform way ahead of everyone. It remains to be seen. All I know is everyone I speak to on the doors, everyone who my team speak to, all we hear is reform, 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 reform. And the vast majority want to vote reform because this is what they want. And there is a small amount who like reform, but are voting reform as a protest vote. Then a minimal amount, by far the vast majority want to vote reform because they can see the sense, because our plans speak for themselves. And why is it that our plans will benefit the country so much more? Why are our plans head and shoulders above Labour and the Conservatives? Because we're going to take the globalists, the WEF, the WHO, the UN, the EU, and the ECHR, and we're going to actually tell them to take a hike. We're not going to allow Europe to be fleecing our country anymore. We're not going to allow the French to just be helping themselves to our fish. We may even make allowing them to fish in our waters conditional. If one single migrant gets across the channel, they'll lose their fishing licenses. I wonder what would happen then. How many would get across then, do you think? But Labour and Conservatives are not in power for this country. We know for a fact that Keir Starmer has made it clear he prefers Davos to Westminster. They really don't care. All they are concerned about is serving their masters, not serving their electorate. Sent to the press by the Reform person. Fantastic. Brilliant to hear that. Liam Booth, Isherwood, formerly our candidate for Earwash, is suspected of being bought off by the Tories. Maggie Throop and CCHQ. Dirty tricks are at play. They are indeed. And as I said, there have been people who have maliciously instigated a plan to stand for reform and get the candidacy, and then either find fault or misbehave so that they are thrown out and embarrass the party. But either way, it was planned. And then what happens is we then get your BBC Question Time hand-picked audience who'll just say, you always play the victim. Well, if you have mainstream media, if you have the other powerful parties with millions of pounds at their disposal, and the obvious control that they have, the network that they have, then we have to fight very, very hard just to be heard. But despite their best efforts, I'm afraid we're walking all over them. Okay, who we got here? Evening, Anthony. As you have very much interest in property development, how do you line up with Reform UK housing policies? Surely, as more landlords take over more and more properties, there are less available for the normal house buyer who wants a. Let's have a look. It doesn't fit it all there. Permanent home. My beliefs are that property developers should have their portfolios limited. There would be ways around this, I guess, as they are one of the reasons for house price increases. I also get that renting suits some, but my current experience has seen areas become a landlord's paradise. Understood. And yes, I have covered these in many videos. I don't want to go off on a tangent on property because if I get on that, then that is all we'll talk about. So I'll just say it to you very, very quickly, briefly in bullet points. And if you'd like me to, I'll cover it in another video. Step one, 2 million brownfield sites, capacity for 2 million homes. They must be built before we allow these horrible, crooked, untrustworthy, controlling major developers to just keep building outwards on our farmland. That needs to be built on. How's it going to be built on? Well, as you know, London is filled with empty properties, which are basically car parks for overseas investors' ill-gotten gains. That needs to stop. Overseas investors should be able to invest in this country, but they should not be able to park their money in a property and leave it empty. Hundreds of thousands of properties in London, whole streets like the Bishop's Avenue, sat there decaying since the 1980s because the people bought it, parked their money there, they don't care. That should not be permitted. That must stop. If they want to invest in this country, then with incentives and laws, carrot and stick, their money should be directed at building affordable housing, social housing, starter homes on all of these brownfield sites. Over the last decade, there has been planning granted for 1.1 million homes that haven't been built on. And 30% of all planning never gets built on, nearly double that in London. As I've said before, if you haven't joined the dots, the largest developers buy up all this land, along with one or two others at a major supermarket. I also understand is involved in land banking and control the supply of property that comes to the market. If you've ever applied for planning permission, you'll be aware that planning permission normally has a 3-year span on it, which means that you need to start work on the property, on the planning, on the building, within 3 years or the planning expires. Starting a project could be as basic as digging a hole for a footing. It can be nothing. I'm in favour of the opposite. I'm in favour where housing developments are concerned, when planning is granted, that it does not have a 3-year starting date, that it has a 3-year completion date. And if the developers do not complete by that date, then they must be punished substantially to ensure that property is available. There are 673,000 empty homes throughout the UK, either long-term unoccupied, unfit for purpose, derelict, people have died intestate and they haven't gone through probate, that sort of thing. They must be addressed and incentives must be offered to the British public because the major developers are not interested in those. It is people like you and I who will renovate these homes. But George Osborne, in his wisdom, added a 3% stamp duty surcharge. And then this last guy, the fiscal drag queen, basically eroded the capital gains tax allowance of 12,500 to zero. Whereas what he should have done, if it were down to me, which is what I would petition for, would be for the capital gains tax allowance to be raised, reinstated and raised, but conditional, not for people to be buying not the buying up these nice homes and just splitting them into 3 or 4 units. People are living in less and less and less space, and that is one of the greatest sources of stress and mental health problems because people are not animals. They cannot live in 20, 30, 40 square meters. I believe that these homes, especially when they are Victorian homes, for example, they should be renovated sympathetically as family homes. And once they are renovated and brought back into use with a minimum EPC rating of a C, for example, to a certain specification, then the developer can get their tax-free allowance. Whether the property then is sold out, sold on, or rented is irrelevant. It will come to the market. And let me put it to you this way: if more and more and more properties come to the market and simultaneously we control the uncontrolled immigration that comes to this country that keeps taking up the supply, that means that supply cannot meet the demand, then what would happen is rents would then stabilize. It wouldn't be as profitable as it was when we had the situation that we do now, where there's the demand exceeds supply and pushes prices up. We could effectively, very simply, have an abundance of property, but we need to control who comes here for the benefit. That's just one area: housing. There's healthcare, there's schools, dentists, roads, infrastructure. We are buckling at the edges because we just cannot cope with the number of people. Doesn't matter who they are, we cannot cope with the numbers. But the housing is the easiest one to address, and it needn't cost the government anything because the land is there and financing it is straightforward, provided that the correct laws and the correct tax incentives were put in place. And we need to take steps to ensure that people from around the world can't simply buy a property, leave it empty, and lock out people who live there from buying a property. That is wrong. That's unethical. It's immoral. And actually, that's how it works in Australia. I believe that in Australia, if you're an overseas investor, you must generate 4 residential units for each one that you're going to buy. But I don't know the full details. So if you do, I'd love to hear from you. I hope that does answer your question. I'm very, very passionate about that. And I would champion a complete change in everything to do with housing, given the opportunity, of course. Uh, I believe massively underestimating. It's possible. At this point, all I'm doing, all we're all doing, is we are just keeping our feet on the ground and just doing our utmost to get the message across and watching out for dodgy reporters. Anthony, Reform have had support from Poland, Czechoslovakia, India, Iran, and the USA on Tuesday TV today. Really? I haven't seen that. But I know that the latest rumor is that it's the Russians that are making us so popular. Now, what does that remind me of? I know. Clinton versus Trump, the debate. Do you remember? Clinton, well, the Clintons, the most toxic people to ever enter the White House. They are the couple who entered the White House and turned a Russia that was on its knees under Boris Yeltsin, a Russia that was effectively reaching out to the West, and they made Russia an enemy so that there could be a bogeyman that they could use to misdirect us while they were up to all the treachery that they were when they were in office. And now it's the Russians that are responsible for our ratings or our success online. Okay, whatever. Liz Truss was stitched up, but she was naive too. Agreed. Naive, reckless, maybe bit of a chip on her shoulder. You can imagine. I would imagine that there was there would have been a very chauvinist environment around her. You know, how's little Liz going to manage to sort this out? And maybe, I don't know, maybe she dug her heels in, or she was goaded to just throw too much out there too quickly. But they were determined to bring her down because they wanted to put Rishi in. And once again, if you have to ask why, then the answer is follow the money. Oh, sorry, I missed something here. I missed one. Isn't it time to bring regulation to ban algorithm manipulation under electoral fairness and transparency, given that 90% of information is now from social media platforms? I think it's absolutely disgraceful. And back to the topic of this stream, when mainstream media interferes in any way in how they project parties or individuals, I believe that they are guilty of interfering with the democratic process. They're interfering with the election. Ultimately, and I've said this many times before, they are so determined when you see them in their live debates to just squabble. They achieve nothing. In fact, they do achieve something. They alienate the voters. And if you alienate voters, you effectively damage democracy. We need people to engage. And I have to say this, I've said this before, and I have to say it again. We've only had a couple of debates here in Northampton, and we're just as passionate about whatever we're talking about as, you know, as these fakes on mainstream TV. And our debates were really civilized, and we actually all enjoyed them. And I'm of the opinion that it's a shame that we couldn't have done a lot more of that. And rather than have a debate where we have 4 or 5 questions and it's all hurried with just 3, 4 minutes or 5 minutes for each, a debate with one topic, one question, and we debate that topic in each debate. Because ultimately, what matters is to engage the public properly and have a proper debate and argue your case. I would always be right, of course. But seriously, if we engage the public more, if the public can actually hear arguments, and it is about the issues and not about trying to score points, then perhaps our democracy would be much, much more robust than it is now, where often around half the electorate, give or take, doesn't engage or maybe doesn't even vote. That's wrong. We should encourage people to actively be taking an interest in what is going on. And as I've said before, we have the technology now to securely enable people to be able to log into a secure account and cast a vote just like that. I don't know why we need all of these paper votes, which are so easy to fraud, and they are quite often. Why can you not just log into your .gov account where you do your self-assessment or other things securely and be able to cast your vote? Why can't we vote on the things that concern us? When was the last time we actually had a vote in this country, a referendum, before 2016, apart from our elections? June 1975, and that was, should we stay in the common market, which they lied. And keep in mind that Margaret Thatcher admitted years later that she knew it was an ever closer union, but the British public weren't ready for it. Did we vote on the Maastricht Treaty, the Lisbon Street Treaty? Did any of us vote for Blair to open the floodgates? Did any of us vote to give our permission for Blair to take our boys, to use them as part of some geopolitical game in Iraq? Did we vote for mass migration? Did we vote for net zero? Did we vote for this woke agenda that's being thrust on us? We didn't vote for any of it. People must have a voice and they must be represented, and they're not being represented now. For the main part, just like that old man that stood up on Question Time, must be the question of the whole election campaign. Are you two really the best that this country can offer? It's not about which one you prefer, it's about which one do you dislike the most effectively. Well said, Anthony. Thank you very much. Thank you. Duncan, good question. Right. Okay. Yes, I see it. The one before. Sorry. Miles away. Are there any MSN we can trust anymore? No. I'll stick to Tuesday. Bless him. No wonder he's doing so well. And we, again, uh, his he knows how to tread carefully and play the game. I'm sure that they've had they've had designs on him because he's becoming a big voice now, and on many occasions he's getting more views than some of the other channels. So here's a breath of fresh air. There isn't many, I'm afraid, anymore. Has any newspaper printed the Stitch Up actor story truthfully? Not really. Obviously, I don't expect any media to say that the guy was plant paid or a plant. Fine, but it could have been portrayed objectively, and more importantly, his role should have been presented. He is not part of the party. Here's somebody who offered to go and knock on some doors and give some flyers out. That's it. I've had the same. I don't know how they've behaved when they've been out there. I met them, said hello, maybe have a coffee, maybe I didn't, handed them some flyers, told them which area would be good for them to distribute the flyers, and off they go. If they do anything wrong, the first I would hear about it is when I get a call or an email from a reporter. So it's very, very unfair to use that to slander an individual, let alone a whole party. There is more than enough proof to bring Boris Johnson up for war crimes over mandates on NHS workers and other key workers for bullying them into having the jabs. Yeah, well, as I said yesterday, he's one of the greatest disappointments in recent political history because there was so much that he could have done. Um, we knew what our gut feeling was about him back in 2019. Many of us had a gut feeling that he only ever championed the Leave campaign because he thought it wouldn't win and he thought it would make him look good and it would keep him in the limelight. And I'm sure it was his worst nightmare when we voted to leave. He effectively lied, but not just lied, but he betrayed the country. And his antics with a piece of cake or or a so-called party is nothing compared to the other betrayals from what was enforced on us in the lockdown, from his betrayal over Brexit, from his betrayal with all this woke agenda, from his betrayal in allowing part of the United Kingdom to just be handed over to the EU in real terms without even a shot being fired, without even putting up a fight. And he had a huge majority. He could have embraced Brexit. He could have been firm. He could have had this country growing and being prosperous, which would have enabled more investment, which would have created yet more prosperity. He has a lot to answer for. Whether he does, I don't know. Oh, sorry. Pardon my ignorance, Anthony. What is Davos? Davos is it's a place in Switzerland where the leaders go to to negotiate what they can do, how they can serve us better. That's the official story. Online, should we stick to that one for now? But I think you can guess what I'm saying. I hope. Can we cap the number of properties that a landlord is allowed in his portfolio? Can starter homes be exempted from being bought by landlords? Anything can be done. It needs to be negotiated. But then, having said that, we have Lloyds Bank, who announced just not that long ago that by 2025 they intend to be the biggest landlord in the country. What's really happening is individuals are being pushed out, throttled out, and the corporations, the banks, are just buying up everything. I don't think that's right either. So we really, really need to have a proper debate about housing, and we need to address this properly, because there are arguments for rental properties to be available because our society has changed. The very reason that the assured short hold tenancy was introduced in 1988 under Margaret Thatcher was because the British workforce had changed. Just a decade before, most people worked in a factory for many years, if not all their lives. In Northampton, in a shoe factory, in Corby, in a steelworks, in Wales, in a mine, whatever it may be. And as things changed through the 80s, good or bad, right or wrong, they changed. The country needed a mobile workforce because the way work is now, you could be working in Manchester for 2 years and then you get a job and you need to go down to Kent or Bristol or another part of the country. It's quite very, very difficult if you don't have an assured short hold tenancy. Having said that, the problem with the assured short hold tenancy for those who simply intend to stay in the same place indefinitely is that they are, in reality, constantly living in temporary accommodation, because an AST, assured short hold tenancy, is for 12 months. If you've moved in anywhere, it takes you a couple of months to settle in, and a Section 21 can be issued 2 months before the end of the rental agreement. So you are in a property for a couple of months, you've only just settled in, and you're only 8 months away from your next Section 21. And then you've got all of that stress of finding somewhere to rent, working it out that the one you're going to rent is going to be after the one you're going to leave out, so that you don't pay rent twice, or that you don't end up with a gap and then you're homeless for a while. All of that, something needs to be done about it. And there, I'm always in favour of incentives rather than control. I'm not keen on control, because if we start going down the control route for anything, we'll turn into Labour, and I wouldn't want to see myself or Reform or any party turn into these controlling Marxists. Much better to have incentives where landlords perhaps have an incentive to rent out a property on a much, much longer agreement. But the reason that they can't is not their fault, or rather the reason that they don't is not always because they don't want to, it's because they can't, because the lenders invariably don't allow you in their terms to rent it for more than 12 months. And buy to let lenders invariably do not like new buy to let properties being bought with a tenant in place. They make your life so difficult when there's a tenant in situ that it's easier to sell a rental property. It's easier to evict the tenant, sell it empty, and then re-rent it again. This is down to legislation. This is down to firm laws governing housing and banking and mortgages and all of that side of things. And in terms of incentives for people to be able to stay in houses longer, I'm sure that if we were to draw on people um, who specialize in the financial side of things, that we could come up with a viable plan. As with everything, you don't need to have all the answers to find the answers. What you need is the will to look for the answers and the humility to be willing to listen to people who know more than you do. And I believe all of these problems that I've covered, they can all be dealt with. But it would be wrong and it would be arrogant for me to simply say, well, the answer for this is let's just do this and perhaps we could do that. I don't want to pluck answers out of thin air. I want to actually look for answers. And I know the very people who I would go to actually to ask them kindly to be involved in helping to sort out the housing crisis. People who know about housing, but people who have concerns for the right reasons. I won't mention their names, but I've already made it obvious that even as a local MP, if I was successful, I would approach them to get their advice on what I should be campaigning for, and hopefully encourage others to see the same view as mine, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Um, do you know anything about the People's Anti-Establishment Anti-Corruption Party originating in the USA? And some in the UK comments oddly on a lot of channels I go on. No, it rings a bell. I've seen it, but I don't know anything about it. I'm sorry, I don't. There is a lot of shout for Blair should be tried for war crimes, but he should also be tried for treason. I agree. I completely agree with you. Hence the reason that the first thing, major law he changed was to abolish hanging for the offence of treason. He has a lot to answer for. Um, if genuinely makes a mistake, to certain degree, it can be maybe forgiven, depending if it's an error of judgment. There's a difference between that and being reckless, and there's a difference between being reckless and being treacherous. They're all different degrees. Blair was at the far end of the scale, treacherous, I'm afraid. Oh, sorry, this one first. I believe Reform will do massively well in the polls, but are obviously being downplayed by the media. They are trying to stitch Nigel and Reform up, but the British public are waking up. I believe that they have woken up. I believe that they have woken up. Everything they have done has backfired. It really has. At this point, we've got 3 days. These are going to be in light of what we're facing. I can't speak for the other candidates because everybody's busy. We're all non-stop. But I know that I won't relax for the next 3 days. I literally can't, because I know that there are people out there plotting against myself and all of the others. And that's a very uncomfortable place to be, especially as we're standing up to just simply do something for our country, to fight for our country politically. That's why we're standing up. And yet we're being subjected to all of this toxic mud that's being thrown at us. But we're getting used to it. And ultimately, one thing they can't take away is the fact that reform has become what it is. The fact that we have the support of the people and they are threatened by that. They are terrified. And if you happen to have watched the live stream from the NEC today and you heard the speeches, I believe that if they were listening to those speeches, which they were, they would literally be trembling with fear. Bojo is such a liar. Isn't that the truth? Pardon the pun. Mr. T thinks that Hope, not Hate, may have financed the actor on Channel 4 behalf. It's possible. What is it with that guy? I mean, was he bullied at school, or I don't know, why would somebody be so toxic that all they do is try to just interfere in the way that he does. Davos is the informal name of the annual 4-day conference held by the World Economic Forum in Davos, Klosters, Switzerland. Correct. Boris should have just walked away from the EU with and wave and a goodbye and let them do the running. We would have been in a far stronger position. Yes, we would. But he didn't have the guts to do it, nor the will, because the day after he was elected in 2019, he could have said, right, we're out. Get your boats out of our water. We are finished. You don't get a single penny. Now, what is it that you want? You want to fish. In return, you do this and this and this. But if we have even one lorry delayed in Dover, we'll blow your fishing boats out of the water, effectively. Will reform go after hope, not hate? I don't know. In reality, this is just a toxic hater sat on a keyboard, who hates the world and hates freedom and just wants to drag everybody down for whatever reason. His life must be tragic enough as it is. The best thing to do with people like that is to actually leave them alone and wish them long life, because that gives them more time to just live with their own venom. We need enough new homes for everyone to live in. Completely agree. And it can be done. It definitely can be done. Enough. Yes, I got that. Corporate fascism, completely understood. Reference corporations buying up everything. Yes, again, this is our problem. Powerful corporations. Nigel Farage termed it correctly today. We don't elect prime ministers in this country or anywhere in Europe. We're electing middle managers, and they answer upstairs. Richard Tice has property knowledge. He said it in his speech today. He does. Absolutely, he does. And definitely housing will be addressed. Reform doing massively well. The NEC look crazy. So many people looking for change. Both Labour and Tory have given birth to reform. Yes, I do think that they deserve a round of applause, because they gave birth to reform, but they gave life to reform, and they have promoted reform, and they had made reform the most popular party in the country. They can spin it any way they like, but you know it, I know it, and they know it. My Facebook feed is just full of reform posts, and people are changing their pictures to reform. It's great to see. It was quite amusing 5 or 6 weeks ago when it became clear just how far ahead of Labour and Conservatives reforms engagement is on social media, and the Conservatives announced that they were going to invest money into sponsored ads to compete with reform, and then they run out of money because two of their biggest sponsors have come to reform. David, good news indeed. Soros is very old. So actually, it was one of the tweets that they picked up on me from 2016 was about Soros. Another one was about Bill Gates. Another one was about Rothschilds. Another one was a video, a Hitler video or something like that. Just historical, something I'd shared. But, they had to portray it. They had to use something. But that's not bad going. 4 or 5 tweets out of, I think, 80 or 90,000. Imagine how much time it took them to find them. We need councils and housing associations to erect purpose-built bungalows with walk-in showers for the elderly to live in, thereby freeing up large council houses for families. Common sense. Absolutely. Again, we have capacity on brownfield sites around the country for 2 million homes. And all we need to do is direct inbound investment into building rather than just parking. That's all we need to do. And it won't really mean that they won't make as much, because what they build can be rented out. It can be rented out long term. It can be rent to buy, meaning that people can rent it and after a few years they can get a discount and buy the property, in which case the investor gets a yield, then a return, then they can build more. It needn't cost anything. And imagine directing overseas investment into building on brownfield sites and redeveloping inner cities. The Not only will this help our towns and cities, help with our housing, but think about the economy, the effect on the economy from the multiplying factor from the construction materials, the people working on the sites, content for the properties, furniture, kitchens, dining tables, bedding, beds, etc., etc., etc. It would be so good for our economy. It would generating money rather than this nation that is being run into the ground and the will of the people, the spirit of the people, literally being sucked out of them by these horrid, evil globalists. I moved out of my semi-not council social and moved into an older person's flat with 24/7 emergency support cord. A family moved into the house I lived in. Yes, again, it is about building the right properties so that we can take advantage of some of the larger homes for those who need them, provided that they're distributed fairly, of course, not in the way that they are now, if you understand my meaning. Interesting results in French elections. Yes, once again, Europe is in panic, and Macron must be kicking himself because, as a result of the European elections, he spat his dummy out, called a snap election, thinking that they're going to put up or shut up. Well, actually, they're going to kick him out. This is good to know. No one in particular. Right, okay. I see. Right. Okay. I get it. Previous comment. I feel safe now. Pleased to hear that. The economy has worked well when there is a lot of construction. Yes, correct construction, targeted property. As the lady said, we have a lot of older people, so it would make sense to build bungalows. It would make sense to build one bed starter homes for first time buyers, for young people. Let's help them to get a home, rent a home. Let's help them to buy a home. Let's hold their hand and help this generation that has been basically shafted in every way. Let's give them a future. Wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't it be wonderful? And wouldn't it be even nicer to do to do to take steps to do something tangible about our environment rather than just play politics with it? How about addressing microplastics, addressing pollution, addressing the things that we can do something about, and sitting down, accepting the effects it may have on our goods, and taking steps to twist China's arm before they choke the entire planet. We have got these hypocrites who are exploiting this to make billions of pounds for themselves and their friends. And yet, if the emissions of the entire continent of Europe were to become zero today, China's output, or rather China's increase in output, not what they output already, their increase in output over the next 2 or 3 years with all of their coal-fired power stations that they have in the pipeline would exceed what the whole continent of Europe pumps out now. That is how bad China is. And do any of them even hint at addressing that? Not a word. They just want to take 30% of our farming land out of production and plant weeds and flowers on it. They're taking our farming land and putting solar panels on. What happens to those solar panels when their life expires? They're taking our farmland and filling it, each wind turbine, 800 cubic meters of concrete. When they're finished with it, they'll just have to bury it, and that land and subsequently a lot adjacent to it will be toxic forever, because that amount of concrete, it's just an impossible job to remediate that land. This is what these people are doing to us. Right, what's the next one? Yes, free market can work best rather than government interference. Although as Britain is broken, I can understand it might need a nudge. Again, I prefer incentives to elbows. Prefer to inspire people rather than control them. I prefer to give people options rather than dictate to them. Once you go down, any government goes down the road of beginning to control people, they get a taste for it. And successive governments take us back, eventually would bring us back to where we are now and where we're heading. No one in particular. I did the same. I'm very happy and safe now in one bedroom ground floor flat with a walk-in shower. I'm crippled and life is so much easier. That's good to hear, and there should be more of those. Is second round in France on the 6th? I don't know the date. I think it's in 2 weeks, isn't it? Or is it 1 week? I'll have to check. Might actually be next Sunday. Okay. Next one. My grandson pays £900 a month for renting a 2-bedroom house in St James. It's extortionate. Yes. It's St James is actually on target. Unless we do something about demand, that house is on target to be £1,000, to break the £1,000 any time. And in fact, there are houses like that in Northampton, like St James, which are just about to break the £1,000 per month rental, which is a horrendous amount, isn't it? Absolutely. Don't think you could rent anything for less than 1,000 in Birmingham. In Birmingham, no. I live in Lincolnshire and the fields are full of wind turbines. They are an eyesore too, aren't they just? Okay, next one. When I was a kid, the only plastic you ever saw was cheap toys from Hong Kong. Recycling was deposits on bottles, milk in bottles, and paper bags that went on the fire. Absolutely. Given the opportunity or the right, I would actually ban plastic bottles for water and for soft drinks tomorrow, or like within a week or two, and water fountains every public place, every petrol station, every shopping mall, every airport, every railway station, everywhere. It would be the norm to just carry your bottle or a cup around or whatever, or just be able to just press the button on the fountain and drink. The problem is that, again, treading on the toes of powerful people. Think about the companies that produce whatever goes in plastic, in these plastic bottles. They are powerful. They have a lot of money, and it will affect them seriously, but it has to be done. That's something that we can address immediately. Let's see when Glastonbury finishes, how many plastic bottles they leave behind, and then I'm sure you're aware anyway. Think about how many of those just end up out in the ocean. How many get washed up on the Hawaiian Islands and various other places, depending on how how the currents work. The amount of microplastics we have in our oceans, in our fish, in our food chain, getting into people. It's getting into people's kidneys. It's causing sterility, and these people don't say a word. Why not? Follow the money. Free plastic toys in Kellogg's cornflakes packets. I remember those years ago. Demand and supply. We need to increase supply, yeah, absolutely, and reduce demand. My daughter pays over £1,000 a month for a flat in Highcliffe, Dorset. Oh, what was this one? I think if the sun shines on plastic bottles, it releases cancer-causing chemicals. I seem to recall reading it somewhere years ago. I believe so. Is expensive, definitely. And releases, yes, understood. Right. If there's no more questions, I think I might even call it a night now. We've done okay. Only an hour and 20 minutes. um, I'll think of another topic for tomorrow evening, and I'm open to suggestions about topics because it's about discussion. That's what matters. And I really, really want to see discussion. I'm such a huge supporter of debate, discussion, and democracy, but properly. I don't mean question time. That's an insult to democracy. We have a man who delivers lemonade every fortnight to everyone in our village. We get 30p back on each glass bottle. We did this when I was a nipper almost 70 years ago. Yes, well, when my parents had a chip shop, they used to sell Corona. Do you remember that? Cherryade, limeade, orangeade, and I think there was one dandelion and burdock, if I remember right. Anthony, I found out shredded paper can't be recycled. It gets caught in the grinder teeth. Uh, there's always something that can be done with paper, but a lot of our so-called recycled material is not actually recycled properly. It requires a start to finish plan so that we can ensure that the products that come through can be recycled, that life is made easier for us. We have all these plastic bottles because that's what we buy, for example, but there are alternatives, and that's what we should be doing immediately, because that is something we can do immediately. I'm not ruling out everything else. We should have a plan for cars to be getting cleaner and so on and so forth. But we need to also think, what is it that we can actually do immediately that will have a massive effect? Okay, what we got? Yes, get somewhere. Sorry, I missed the start of the live stream. What about the waspy women? I'm one of them. Whereabouts are you? I don't know if you were in the stream last night. I was contacted by the Northampton waspy women. I had a meeting with them not last Wednesday, the Wednesday before, in Malton in Northampton. I met two, three, or four of them. They filled me in on their story. I took a photo with them, expressed my support. I do support them. I've also introduced them to a colleague, friend, candidate for Oadby and Wigston in Leicestershire, who is a passionate waspy supporter. So I've introduced them. At this point, that's all I can do. But I did tell them that after the election, I will continue to support them, whether it's as an MP or whether I just continue supporting them as a local councillor. They will still have my support. And feel free to get in touch if you are local, and happy to hear more and what I can do to help. Take care, all thanks. Ideas arise from discussion. The start to every solution begins with dialogue. And when people begin to control the dialogue, manipulate it, or shut it down, they are preventing solution and they're preventing engagement. And it's ridiculous, because when you're in a position that you're looking for solutions, why not literally make time and give opportunity to the people to engage with you so that you can learn from them, and then you can work collectively. Beats me. Okay. Compost, mulch can be used in gardening, pets bedding. I want glass bottles back. Absolutely. Good night, everybody. God bless you all, and good night. Back and recycled. Okay, sorry, just finished. Thank you, Anthony. We Wasp Women are being ignored. It caused me great hardship. I'm in Northeast Lincolnshire. Well, drop me an email. Anyway, happy to introduce you to the Northampton Waspy Women. I don't know if you have an association, or perhaps send me a message, and when I have some time, maybe after the election, after Thursday, towards next weekend, and possibly we can arrange a time and I can give you a call and see what I can do to support your cause, or introduce you to people who can support you. I'd be happy to do that. No problem. It'd be my pleasure. Got to go now. Thanks, Anthony. Bye all. Bye everyone. Thank you. Good night. Am I getting a ring of what was it? Good night, John Boy. Showing my age now. Right. Anyway, thank you very, very much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening, what's left of it, and all being well, unless I actually just pass out because I'm so tired, I'll join you tomorrow evening as well. Open to suggestions about topics, although we seem to randomly go all over the place anyway.